Man, this situation is getting real crazy on How to Get Away with Murder. Let's talk about it. Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to KRS TV. This is your boy Kenny, and this is How to Get Away with Murder, Season 5, Episode 11, and the name of this episode is Be the Martyr. So the episode opens up, Nate is being questioned by the FBI. They're swabbing him for DNA. He tells them that, look, Miller ordered an inquest into my father's death, but I think he only did that just to cover his ass, you know, and they use this as a ruse to to put a hit out on my father, and he also suspects that the governor's involved, and he lets the FBI know this. So then it rewinds 24 hours earlier before Nate talks to the FBI. We see that Bonnie from last week, remember she had met up with Seth and he gave her the call logs to everyone that called the warden. She's playing the one where Miller was talking to the warden, and she's like, maybe we were wrong, but Nate is not trying to accept this. He's like, no, I didn't kill an innocent man. Obviously this was just obviously he just used this to cover his ass and all of that, but Annalise is letting them know that, look, this may be proof that maybe Miller didn't have anything to do with this. But he said, but she was working with the governor, and we know the governor probably did. And Annalise lets them know that, look, you're here it is, the governor is a white woman, you know, a powerful white woman, and then there's you. Right now you're looking like a suspect the way you're carrying off. But he was like, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. So Nate is not trying to hear anything other than the fact that Miller was behind his father's death and that he was working with the governor, and Nate is not trying to accept anything else other than that narrative. So then we see Annalise and Bonnie have a conversation after Nate leaves, and she pretty much said that the FBI is going to start questioning everyone, and Annalise tells Bonnie that hurting yourself is not the answer. So she's already picking up that Bonnie is so deeply depressed that she's suicidal. So then we actually see that Annalise calls Asher and tells Ash, because she pretty much told Bonnie that she should, you know, stay home, stay with me, because so you won't be by yourself. But Bonnie was insistent on going to work. So she calls Asher and tells Asher to keep an eye on her, and he was like, oh, my bad, I thought you was calling for something else. And Annalise was like, what else is there? And then he says that I'm not the only one who knows. So that was given, and that gave Annalise the nobility that the whole Keaton crew knows about Miller and Nate. So back at Kaplan Gold, Annalise meets up with Oliver, Connor, and Michaela. You know, they talk about the FBI and Miller because they said that, you know, the FBI probably will be questioning you. But then they were like, did you see him at the wedding? Did you see him? Did you see him? Okay, then just tell him that you didn't see anything, so therefore you know nothing. And but then she was like, where's Laurel? And then Michaela's like, what am I, her keeper? I'm like, bitch, this shit is serious and you still being snappy? Sit your ass down. But then Annalise was like, well, no, you need to get to Laurel so we all will have the same story, and shut the hell up, by the way, because you being all loud. And then all of a sudden Tegan comes in, and Annalise leaves out, and she talks to Michaela about that wrongful death suit. And she was like, and she asked, did you get Nate to sign off on it yet? She was like, well, I've been trying to get in touch with Nate, but I haven't been able to reach him. And Tegan was like, you know, I had to really do some work to get Crawford to approve this, so either you get Nate on board or I'll call him myself. And then we see that Michaela calls Laurel, and it goes to voicemail. We come to find out, damn, Laurel done cornered Bonnie in the parking lot, and she's like, so what happened? Did Christopher see this? Did Christopher see anything? You know? And then she was like, Asher told us everything. Yeah, so you mean to tell me that my child witnessed a murder, and do you know that, you know, a child at that age can see something that can stay with them for the rest of their life? He can have PTSD. What did he see? And Bonnie's like, I don't think he saw anything. And Laurel is so mad that she's about to really fight Bonnie until Asher breaks it up, and she's like, look, you need to calm down. Like, come on now, she just lost her boyfriend. Don't you see she's in pain? And she was like, yeah, and that's the only reason why, and that's the only thing that's stopping me from killing her ass. I'm like, that damn Laurel is over the top. And y'all know I can't stand Laurel. Laurel gets on my fucking nerves. But then again, I understand why she's so upset, because this is her son. This is her newborn son. And we saw in the mid-season premiere that she found a stain of blood on Christopher's jacket. So right now, you know, Laurel is just irate, and she was pretty much on one the entire episode. And like, all of a sudden, Bonnie looks at Asher and she said, "You promised Nate you wouldn't tell." Well, yeah, he did, but, you know, due to the fact that Asher can't hold water, he cracked. So then we see Nate meeting up with this guy. We come to find out that this guy is the juror in the inquest case that read the verdict. And the guy tells Nate, look, the judge said we can't talk to you. He's like, look, I just want to know about the evidence. You know, what made you guys come to your conviction? And then he pretty much said that, look, your father's prints were on the gun. And it was like, what do you mean my father's prints was on the gun? None of this was presented during the case. What the hell you mean? And he was like, well, the bailiff gave it to us, and that's what we based our decision on. That his DNA was on the gun, so therefore we sided with the fact that there was no foul play, that he possibly killed himself. Then we see that Annalise and Emmett finally have this sit down with the woman who was pretty much suing Crawford for sexual harassment, even though what they had was a consensual relationship. So we finally meet them, and the guy who's representing her is the actual head of Plan and Gold in London. So this is Emmett's boss, and he's also Annalise's boss too, because so we pretty much see this whole thing go on, and the woman's name that Emmett was dating was Nora, and you can immediately tell that him and Nora definitely got a connection. And we come to find out that Nora actually owns a DNA company, and she had made a decision to invest in the stock that pretty much backfired. But they're saying that Miller was the one that advised her, when in all actuality he didn't, and also because they had a consensual relationship that was against the code of ethics, and that's what they're going with. And Annalise is now representing Crawford, so now she's in the meetings, and they're trying to pin the narrative that because Emmett didn't advise her, she pretty much lost, you know, a lot due to him. But then Annalise comes up with a narrative like, instead of putting this on C&G, won't you put it on the pharmaceutical company, because they knew about the rules and regulations of whatever it is they were presenting, and that Nora got played. But then the lawyer, who I think his name is Jansen, he was like, no, because if we go public with this, her stock is going to plummet. So we're going to stick with the narrative that we have, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we already see that Annalise is on to something with this, with the lawyer, because here it is, they're trying to bury Crawford, but yet they're trying to keep her because she's one of their biggest clients. So Annalise already kind of figured that, yeah, it's about the money right now. But she's also looking at Nora sideways, because she's like, you know, this man is innocent, but yet you're about to let him take the fall. But a lot of that comes to play later. Then we see that Laurel finally shows up to Plan and Gold. She tells them that the reason why you couldn't reach me because I was threatening Bonnie and all of this, and you know, the fact that she made my son witness this, you know, he could possibly have PTSD and all of this, and she's going off, and Connor agrees with her, and she's like, look, I mean, yeah, you know, it's far-fetched in a way, but I have to side with Laurel. I mean, I can understand why she would be upset. But then she's like, you know what, tell Annalise I'm taking a sick day. I ain't got time for this shit. But then finally Michaela tells her Annalise knows. And she's like, what? She's like, yeah, she knows. So Connor was like, yeah, so I think you need to prep for the FBI because they're probably going to question us. So then we see Gabriel is talking to the FBI. Now remember, last week they played that voice message that he left on Miller's phone saying that, look, my cover's blown. They found out who I was. What do I do? Get back to me. Let me know. So that shows you right there that Miller wasn't all innocent in this situation, because we find out that damn Gabriel was a plant that Miller had to find out more information about Annalise and also, you know, how she moves, because he was close to Denver, and Denver was a piece of shit. But Denver was his mentor, so he was saying that Denver told me a lot of bad things about her, so he wanted me to go in to find out more information about Annalise and what she was involved in, because he didn't trust her, and that Denver said that she was involved in some criminal acts. Yeah, and Denver was probably involved in more criminal acts than anything. Annalise actually is innocent, but she's always there to try to clean things up, but she always gets blamed at the end of the day. So they asked him, when was the last time he spoke to Miller? He said 2 months ago. And he was like, do you know he was at the wedding? He was like, no, I didn't see him there. He says, what about Nate Leahy? And he's like, yeah, he was there. He was there as Annalise's date. So now they're still, putting things together here. But now we know the truth about Gabriel, that Gabriel was a plant the whole time. And he was there to sniff information about Annalise, and he was going to be sending this information back to Miller. So then we see that Asher and Bonnie have a moment, and he tells Bonnie that, look, I just didn't up and snitch. They figured it out. In a way they did, but then again, you pretty much told it. Because, as I said, Asher couldn't hold water. And then, Bonnie tells Asher, just tell Annalise I'm fine. And he was like, what? He's like, I know Annalise called you to check on me. But then she tells Asher, you were right. And he was like, I'm right about what? And she tells him that you were right about, about Miller. He was just making sure that Nate Sr. was transferred safely. He wasn't behind, him taking down Nate, but then she tells him that it was me, and we just see the shock on Asher's face, because in all honesty, she did, suffocate him to finish him off. And she said that, look, he was beaten pretty badly. I could have called 911, but I acted to end him, to kind of keep this under wraps. So it was me. And Asher's just shocked. They find out that she was the one that was behind, Miller dying. So then we see that Nate meets up with that investigator that we saw that he had met with before the wedding, and she sent him the picture of Miller at the payphone. And then he says that, I think the DNA test was doctored, and I want you to get me the original, I want you to give me an actual, copy of the DNA test. And she at first she was like, no. And he was like, so then Nate was like, so when did you turn down a job? She says, I turned down the job when EA is missing. After I sent you that information, he disappeared. What happened? And he was saying that, look, he was working for a snitch, and whoever he was about to snitch on, they got rid of him, meaning the governor and her agents. But then she tells him, okay, I'll see what I can do. So then we see Gabriel runs into Annalise. He was like, can we talk? And she was like, no, we can't talk here. Not now, not ever. And that was the end of that. So then we see that Tegan is talking to the Keating crew, and she's asking Kayla, is Nate on board? And she says that, and she's like, well, the only answer I should be getting from you is a yes. But then she says that, look, I did some research on this, and there's like, these cases are never effective unless you have 2 or 3 unbiased witnesses on board, and Oliver backed her up on it. But then Gabriel walked in and completely said that that's not true. All you need is to establish a basis for punitive damages. And she was like, wow, it seemed to me your boy is doing more work than y'all, you know. And, you know, y'all need to get on board with it. And then, like, Gabriel's like, look, I didn't mean to intervene. And Michaela was like, your middle name is Intervene. What the fuck you mean? You just a messy bastard. And he was like, look, is something going on? You know, I mean, because I know Nate was at the wedding. I know you guys care for Nate. You know, and she's like, well, what does that have to do with you? She's like, well, I know Nate was at the wedding. I thought you guys were tight. And then, damn, Oliver's like, yeah, and you were at the wedding. Does that mean we're tight too? And then he walked away because they all are, they are giving Gabriel the blues because Gabriel literally played all their asses. So they're still stuck on that. So then we see that Annalise and Emmett, you know, they talk about the disposition. He talks about how Nora was his client and he told her not to invest in this, but she did it anyway, and she lost a lot of money. So because she lost a lot of money for the firm, since they are pretty much just like Antares, they pretty much own their shares. You know, they're overseeing her shares of her company. She lost a lot of money by this bad investment, and they're now putting it on Emmett, saying that Emmett gave her bad advice, when really Emmett told her not to do it. And then he begins to tell her that, look, you know, she's a female CEO in the science industry, so this is groundbreaking. You know, this woman worked really hard to get to where she is. I'm just a white lawyer who pretty much, of my privilege, I got everything I have. You know? But then Annalise was like, you know, it's always a bad thing when you always put yourself last before everyone else. And he was like, well, you know, just like you, right? And then she was like, look, I realized that my biggest pain was when I didn't put myself first. So she gets a text from Nate where he says, I got the proof. And then earlier he had texted her that that Miller had falsified, you know, the DNA documents. So then we see later after that she goes to meet up with Nate, and she's saying that, you know, they put my pop's DNA on the gun, and that Miller never presented this at the trial. Well, he says that, well, it's known sometimes for the prosecution to give evidence to the jury, you know, and they can keep that private. They don't have to be public with that. And he was like, but that's just it. Miller didn't deliver it. They said a bailiff delivered it to them. So that lets me know that Miller is behind this, and that the DNA was fake, and that Miller was behind this to try to get my dad set up. And she said, look, I agree. The DNA probably may be fake, but there's no key evidence that Miller did this. You know, all we got is your gut, and your gut is not enough to make a conviction. And he's just not trying to hear anything that Annalise has to say. And she lets him know that, look, you are digging your own grave right now. I know you feel guilt and I know you feel angry, but no, you need to stop this. You can't make something be true just because you want it to be. So then he was like, either you have my back or get out. I'm like, Nate, you really fucking tripping. But then again, he's emotional right now. So because the emotions are running, he's not seeing things clearly. And he only wants to see his own narrative, even when Annalise is telling him this is not going to work because, yeah, you may be right, but you can't prove it, so it's a no-go. And then we see that Annalise calls Bonnie. Bonnie hangs up. We see that Bonnie is in her car in the garage, you know, putting her feet on the ignition, pumping the fumes, so Bonnie is trying to kill herself. And Frank actually steps in and helps her. And at the same time, Nate is breaking down emotionally when he's thinking about his father. He's looking at the picture with him and his dad when he was a little boy. He's remembering everything about his dad in the Clash Action suit. All of this stuff. And then all of a sudden seeing his father dead, you know, when he was supposed to have been transferred out into to a mental facility. My bad. But yeah, so he's getting emotional and so was Bonnie. So it's like the both of them are just in a really bad emotional place. So then Nate, after Nate decides to call Bonnie, but Frank answers the phone, and he was saying that, can she get, the custody report of the gun? I want that information. And Frank says, she's not going to be able to do that. And I advise you right now to stop digging. And then he was like, oh, so Annalise tell you to tell me that? He's like, no, I'm telling you. If anything, I'm just as worried as the next man, and you should be too. Now, Frank telling you he's worried, you should be worried because we know how Frank moves. And Frank is clean with his shit, and he's even saying he's worried. So he's telling Nate to drop this inquisition that you have about your father. You need to let it go. Stop digging. But, of course, Nate doesn't listen, and I'm going to break it down. So then we see that back at the house, Laurel is still pissed off. She's going off and everything. And, Ash is saying that, look, yeah, it's a horrible thing, but shit, you've done horrible things too. And I agree, because I think Laurel killed her mother, and I think in time we're going to find out what really happened to her, because the mother just disappeared, and we haven't heard anything from her since the end of season 4. So I'm wondering, what did Laurel do with her mom? And I really do think she killed her mom, but nobody knows about it. And she's like, how do you know that? And like Asher is saying that, how do you know that Christopher saw anything? She was like, I can tell something's not right because he's different. And then he also tells her that, look, Bonnie just lost the love of her life. And she's like, yeah, and I lost the love of my life. So she's just doing the most. And then Michaela was like, yo, I can hear you guys all the way upstairs. So if I can hear you, I know Christopher can hear you too. And she's like, great. Now I'm the one, making things difficult for Christopher. And she goes upstairs and I'm like, oh my God, Laurel, you were getting on my nerves, bitch. I mean, but then again, it's her first child. So she's very overprotective, very hands-on, and gets very snappy if something's not right. And mothers have that connection with their first kid. They don't want no harm to come to their baby. Then we see that Michaela and Laurel have a moment, and she pretty much asks Michaela, you think I'm crazy, don't you? She's like, no, you're a mom. You're supposed to be crazy, and I'm on your side. And she's like, do you think he's going to remember any of that? And Laurel makes a confession that her mother was shot right in front of her when she was 2 years old. And she says, I don't remember a damn thing, and look how great I turned out. I'm like, really, Michaela? But then she was saying that, no, Kristoff's probably not going to remember that at all. But, but then it was crazy. So then we get a real interesting situation. We see that Emmett has a secret meeting with Nora. Nora says that, look, I want to admit my fault. I made a bad decision, and I can't let you go down for this. So we come to find out this whole time, Emmett is throwing himself on the knife to protect her. And protect her interests, because Jansen, who's the head of Complaint and Gold, he wants justice because they lost a lot of stock because of her bad decision making, and they put it on him when really it was her doing the wrongdoing. And then all of a sudden we see them start to make out, and then you hear a knock on the car, and it's Annalise. So Annalise now knows the tea, and she was like, so you mean to tell me she can just cry a few crocodile tears and now you want to cave? He's like, it's not like that. She's like, no, she's using you. This is reverse psychology, or you two delirious that you can't see that shit. And he was saying that, have you ever tried to do something bigger than yourself? That you were willing to put your life on the line for something bigger than yourself? And she's like, you know what, be the martyr if you want to, but see how far it gets you. So we come to find out that, yeah, he was saying that the reason why Emmett covered for her was because he understood her intentions, that she was trying to release all this information that can help with, diseases and many other medical ills that people deal with. But she made a bad deal. And Kaplan and Gold is mad as hell because they lost a lot of money behind it. We see next, Nate's old ass is at the station trying to get that custody report on the gun, and the the police officers tell him that, look, your badge number's not coming up. And he was saying that, look, you can just still give me the information. He's like, yeah, and my supervisor can come down on me for not following protocols. So he was like, look, you can just make this happen. He was like, look. And then the guard was like, look, I know you don't work with the DA anymore, Nate. So he was saying that, oh, so you mean to tell me you knew this whole time and you just been giving me the runaround? Here you are trying to cover up an old man's murder? Are you kidding me? And then the FBI shows up and he's like, oh, you called them, huh? I'm like, yeah, so that's the reason why they kept giving him the runaround, because old boy done called the FBI because Nate was there asking about the custody report gun, which, you know, Annalise said, you're digging your own grave. You're making yourself the suspect because of all the moves you're making. So the FBI shows up and she says that, look, you got 5 seconds to come with us or we're going to arrest you. So we saw that go down. So then we see that Nate's talking to the FBI. We see that Annalise had called him and she pretty much advised him, you can't answer any of their questions. So, you know, cover your ass. Don't say anything. And then Annalise gets word that Emmett wants to see her. On the way to see Emmett, she runs into Tegan. Tegan starts asking about, so tell me, how is Miss Crawford? Is she hot? And she's like, yeah. She's like, she ain't your type, huh? And then Annalise is like, what you talking about? I'm like, Tegan got a thing for Annalise, and we kind of peeped that. I so peeped that shit like, she ain't your type, huh? Because she know about her relationship with Eve, and she knows that because Michaela ran her mouth. But then she brings up the wrongful death suit. And she says that, so can you get Nate Jr. on board? He's like, right now, he ain't focused on that. He wants a criminal suit, and that's the only fight he's invested in. But thank you for your help, though. Oh, man. So then Tegan goes to Michaela, and she's like, you know, so did you get Nate to sign off on the wrongful death suit? She's like, well, I tried, and he's not really interested in pursuing it right now. And she's like, well, what about a criminal trial? And then they're like, oh, no, he's not interested in that either. And she's looking like, why are you lying? You know, and she says that, here it is, I gave you another chance, and yet you did the same bullshit again, Michaela. And then we see that Gabriel's just sitting there, like, just peeping all the bullshit. And I'm like, So I'm like, that damn Gabriel got something with him. Because later on we see that Gabriel actually breaks the actual monitor that Frank had put in his bag to track him everywhere he goes. And then we also saw him cut up, you know, an ID. So here it is, he's about to get another identification. So this is going to be interesting to see how that's going to play out. So on her way, so finally we see that Annalise gets to Emmett, and she's like, first of all, I am not going to let you be this company's bitch. You know, let Jansen take the fall. Got Nora's company, you know, versus Kaplan and Gold, and let Jansen take the fall for what happened. And he was like, She's like, what do you mean? That's a good idea. He's like, yeah, I know, because that's the same one I came up with. So they go to meet up with Nora and Jansen, and they pretty much let him know that, look, you in the hot seat. You know, we can go in that disposition, but yeah, we're going to put everything on you because, you know, you're the one who had a lot to lose by this situation, and now you're trying to, you know, make Emmett take the fall for something that you did, because the only person that has something to lose in the situation is you. So you're the main reason why Nora is behind this. And then he had the nerve to tell Annalise, see, that's the reason why we didn't want you here. You're so toxic, and you're rubbing everybody, and you're affecting everybody with your toxicity or whatever. And then he was saying that, look, he says that, look, my narrative stays the same. And she's like, and they were like, no, either you take we're putting this all on you, because, and then even, you know, Nora started to side with them too. Because Nora did say she was going to admit her guilt, and was not, she said she didn't want to take him down for this, but she admits that Jansen was the one who initiated to go after him, because he was the one who had a lot to lose because of Nora making that bad investment deal. And And then like he got to the point where he says that, look, I'll fire both of y'all asses. And then Annalise was like, well, if you do that, we can actually sue you. We can actually sue you for creating a hostile work environment, and we already done sent that down to HR. So we see that whole thing worked out. And then he even invites, and then we see that we see that Emmett invites Annalise out to dinner. And she was like, well, what about your girlfriend? And he was like, ex-girlfriend. You got to close one door and open a new one. So I'm like, so are you putting your bid out for Annalise, Emmett? So I'm thinking like he's attracted to Annalise. This is be interesting. So it seemed to me that both Tegan and Emmett are both into her. This is going to be interesting how they play that out. So then we see that Nate is questioning the FBI. He's been swabbed or whatever, and they are going in on him. Like they said that we've been following every single thing you're doing, and we're questioning why you were doing this. We saw you talk to a juror. We saw you beat up one of the guards, and now we saw you down there asking about the asking for the information about the gun. Like, what are you doing? And he was saying that, look, I beat up that guard because that guard was the one who shot my father. And then he says that, are you suffering from mental illness? Because, it's a possibility because your father suffered from mental illness. He's like, no, my father had a mental breakdown after being in a shoe for almost over a year. But then he told him that, look, if you want to get a psychiatrist, go ahead and get one. We see afterwards he goes to see Annalise and Bonnie. We see that Bonnie is still like shooken up because she did attempt suicide and Frank saved her. And he said that, look, I gave my DNA to see if it matches my dad's, because me and my dad have the same DNA, and if my DNA doesn't match, then we definitely know that his DNA was planted on that, and that whole inquest was a setup to cover their tracks that my father was murdered. But then Bonnie is, referring to Miller, saying that maybe he didn't do this, and then Nate goes over to her, is like, no, it started with me, I did it, and Annalise is peeping the connection that Bonnie and Nate are having. She's seeing how they're very compassionate with each other, and it's like they both experienced a loss, and usually when that happens, they kind of gravitate towards each other. So we saw that go on. Oh yeah, then I was talking about that. So after, Gabriel, I mentioned before, he cut up one of his fake IDs and broke the device that they were using to spy on him, and then he gets a knock on the door. We don't know who it is, but yeah, he gets a knock. So then we see that Frank is looking over the entire house looking for Bonnie, and he's thinking that Bonnie may have done something to herself because right now Bonnie is suicidal. And he finally finds her in his room, and she said that she didn't want to sleep alone, so he laid next to her. So then we see that Annalise meets up with the whole Keenan crew at their house, and pretty much, she's telling Laurel, you need to forgive Bonnie, and she's like, no. I'm like, Laurel's just being a bitch. Like, girl, stop. And then she says that we all need to stick to the same story, that the governor killed Miller. And that's what we're going with. So then we also see, and she says that we definitely need to keep tight because they also mention there are other people who are trying to investigate this as well. And then we see that Tegan is talking to the FBI, and we come now I remember that FBI was the same FBI agent that she went to report about Antares. So she said that I need to talk to you, and please get back to me whenever you can. And then we see that the FBI comes back with the results to Nate, and he said that, yeah, there was no match. You were right. Those results that were given to the jury was manufactured. And he says that, yeah, by Miller. And she was like, we don't know that yet. And then we see that while she's there with the Keenan crew, she gets a call, Annalise, and it's Gabriel. Gabriel's ass is locked up, and he says, I need a lawyer. I'm like, see, what the fuck did you do now, Gabriel? It's like Gabriel just been causing chaos since he showed up. But that's what I have, y'all. If I missed anything, put it down in the comments. I'd love to talk to you about it. But subscribe to my channel. Click that bell so you get notifications every time I drop a video. Also, follow me on all of my social platforms. I have them all listed in the description box. Also, like this video, comment on this video, and share this video. And I'll be back with the next episode of The Haves and the Have-Nots. For me, this was like a filler episode, but we're seeing things are starting to spiral out of control. So until next time, everybody, take care.